The Striped Ships, Chapter 7. Juliana knelt on the worn stone step third from the bottom, with her back to the dim, death cold reaches of the crypt. She was scouring step 4 with a handful of damp sand, trying in vain not to scrape her already raw and reddened knuckles against the gritty riser. Straight ahead and above her, at the top of the short flight, Count Hugh de Montfort, Sheriff of Canterbury, knelt facing her with piously clasped hands on the reed strewn floor of the church's nave. Juliana eyed him with curling lip. No doubt he sought blessing from the Irish hermit St. Fursey, who was buried down here. Or perhaps he prayed to the bones of St. Wilfrid in the high altar, or to St. Dunstan's in the sanctuary just over her head. A Norman hypocrite, affecting to pray to Saxon saints. As well pray to me, she thought, backing down a step to begin on step 3. May the good saints scorn him as he deserves. I would send a plague of wasps to crawl under that great cloak of his and send him screeching out of here. But her gaze clung to the thick new wool of the cloak, which spread wide over the floor around his knees. It was dyed a yellowish green, which she was glad to note ill became his sallow complexion, but bordered with embroidery, skilled Saxon embroidery, which would have lent elegance to a squint-eyed troll. He looked rich, well-fed, and warm. So warm. She could see a woolen tunic under the woolen cloak. Close woven linen next to his skin showed at throat and forearms. As he rose and crossed himself, flicking bits of winter dry rushes from his knees with a well gloved hand, he revealed bow legs encased in heavy woolen braces, snugly cross gartered, and ending in stout soled high ankle boots. He pulled up the cloak's hood, which was lined with dark fur, and stalked out of her line of vision. Juliana backed downward, grabbed an icy handful of sand out of her bowl, and began to scour step 2. She herself was poor, ill-fed, and as cold as the old hermit saint in his tomb nearby. The clothes Nurse Editha had put on her that bright dawn of Michaelmas Eve, 1066, were stained and threadbare in this bitter December of 1067. Outgrown as well, tug as she would, the rock's sleeves would not cover her wrist, much less her ever-chapped hands, and the old mantle was near to rags. The warmest garment she owned was the thin wool headrail Swain had found for her. It swathed her head and shoulders at all times. As for the shoes of Quineva the alewife's dead daughter, they were worn clean through, useless, save for cutting into patches to mend Kolruna's, the old woman she had found shelter with. Juliana's feet were padded and bound in straw. In vain she reminded herself that she ate daily, if not heartily, and that she slept under a roof, though it was only old Kolruna's mud hut thatch. And she must tend the old woman night and day to pay for it. She freely admitted that it was more than many of the drifting homeless Saxons crowding Canterbury could boast of, or hope for either. But they would not have been homeless, nor she either, were it not for these warm-clad Normans she resented with a fury that seemed to grow, not fade, with every cold and hungry day. I should never have stayed here, she told herself wearily, not for the first time. I should be in Winchester with my mother, but how could I go there without going to Uncle Robert? Swain had forbidden that. Even Edgar had forbidden it, though for different reasons. At the time she had been more than glad to put off journeying anywhere at all, even wondering if in Canterbury she might find her own place, her own life. Canterbury itself she liked well, in summer. It was a busy, important town, full of comings and goings, and in summer she had kept careful watch of them, half expecting each day to glimpse a familiar face, catch a familiar Sussex accent among the Kentish ones. It was Edgar who had weakened her expectation. Shocked at her intention of leaving at once for Winchester, he had forbidden it in their first conversation, stating in his measured, positive way that she need not search for her mother, in Winchester or elsewhere. She is searching for you, Juliana, he had assured her. More than a month back, a messenger came to me from your uncle. I could tell him nothing of you then, for I knew nothing, but— So she is alive. You know this. She reached Winchester. She did, at Eastertide, with Ragni and her servants, after long illness at a small nuns' minster somewhere along their road. I believe the nuns did their best for her, and now she is cosseted certainly in your uncle's care. You have only to stay here, and she will find you. Yea, so. You must not wander alone about the countryside in these dangerous times. Your uncle will send help again. He can give Norman safe conducts, as even our prior cannot, he added a little bitterly. He is right, Jilly, Wulfric had exclaimed. Uncle Robert will surely do so. He would certainly. Once their mother had reached him, he would unfailingly have taken her affairs into his own firm hands. Juliana had stood silent and travel weary, thinking, I need journey nowhere, decide nothing, and cautiously tasted the blissful relief that it brought her. Moreover, she was still free for a time of those firm Norman hands, and even by some miracle might evade them yet. So she had stayed in Canterbury, expecting, while dreading, to see Lustwin's face, but in her heart believing that Edgar would soon send for her, the safe conduct would appear, and her future would be settled willy-nilly. Exactly when belief had faded, when scanning new faces, listening for old accents, had become mere habit, she could not have said, but with the autumn rains and Martin Moss, the stream of travelers had dwindled to a trickle. By now the roads were impassable, and she was again a prisoner, again a drudge. This was hardly the miracle she had hoped for. Washing clothes and scrubbing church floors was little better than emptying slops and plucking hens. It took all her will to listen to Wulfric's eager prattle about his books and his new life, and keep her tongue between her teeth. She scoured the final step, rose stiffly, and tucked both gritty hands in her armpits for a moment, trying to warm some feeling back into them. The crypt had been chill last summer when she had first swept it. Today, St. Nicholas Day, its cold struck straight to her bones. Far above in the north tower, the bell rang for terce. As quickly as she could, with her fingers numb and her feet made huge and clumsy in their straw wrappings, she swept the scattered sand into its bowl with her faggot of broom twigs and climbed the steps into the high timbered frame nave. A backward glance showed her a stair of smooth scoured stones, hollowed in their centers by centuries of monkish footsteps, but clean and white as ordered. Orders had been flying everywhere about the monastery since first light. It was Rufus, one of the older novices, whom had delivered hers. The prior had received his straight from Odo of Bayeux, Swain's Lord Devil, whose henchman had ridden hard from Dover through the sleet-spitting pre-dawn hours to deliver his command. The command was to have the cathedral and all of its precincts ready for King William's attendance at a holy mass. No one knew which one. Sometime within a seven-night, no one knew which day. 8 months had passed since William had sailed to Normandy, taking with him Archbishop Stigand, the abbot, and an abbot or two, the 3 Saxon earls still alive, even young Edward the Prince, the Atheling, and anyone else around whom a strong rebellion might have formed. Scores of scattered ones had flared up everywhere during his absence. Swain's was not the only company of raven hunters. Those in Kent alone had kept Lord Devil Odo busy, but with no Saxon earl to unite them, no rightful prince to gather around, the fires had burned out as quickly as they had flared. Now the striped ships had been sighted from the Dover cliffs, skimming toward Sandwich in southwesterly wind. William was back at last from his long, triumphal parading of captive nobles through his duchy. Juliana wished he had stayed away forever, or sunk without a trace into the gray, cold seas. Though, as God lives, she thought, King William's foot on our necks can scarce be heavier than this Odo's set over us as Earl. Anyway, the crypt steps were fit now for an angel's feet, let alone a devil's, so her task was done. The first monks were already shuffling in through the north door and up the 5 steps to take their places in the stalls of the choir. She slipped out past them across the shadowy vault of the tower, which still quivered with the deep voice of the bell, and outside into the cloister. Among the nearest benches of confusion of schoolboys of varying sizes, but identically red noses, milled about old brother Oddbald, stacking their writing boards with a clatter that kept him hissing like a flustered gander. They gradually sorted themselves into a ragged line along the roofed alley. As she edged by them with her sand bowl and her broom, Wulfric materialized from the hubbub and grabbed her sleeve, tugging her with him behind one of the timbers that supported the cloister thatch. His old mantle had been replaced by a warmer, larger one, coarse but still sound, outgrown by some older pupil. "Meet me in the courtyard," he whispered, "after morrow mass, when the brothers are all in chapter. It's St. Nicholas Day. There'll be extra services." "Not for us boys. Did you hear the king was coming?" "Oh, I heard," Juliana assured him bitterly. "No doubt the fleas in my bedstraw have heard by now, but I can't come back. I'll have old Colruna to tend. Then I must fetch the wash water." "Fetch it from Sunowin's well, just outside the gates here, and I'll slip out. Please, Jilly, I have a thing I must tell you." Wulfric broke off as one of his schoolmates beckoned him urgently. "Well, so, I'll come," Juliana promised, giving him a shove. She watched the line of boys, Wulfric dashing for the tail end, file across the wintry open square of the garth. They were heading back for the warming room, she noticed with the flicker of jealousy she would not own but could not rid herself of. A fire burned there all winter, so Wulfric had told her, in a big iron pot. The boys would be given a quick meal, bread and a mug of ale, and allowed to thaw their toes and fingers and noses until the bell-ending terce summoned them back to the church to join the brothers at morrow mass. She headed for the outer court, trying to put down the resentment she could no more help than hunger. It was well enough for him, fed and clothed, and doing exactly what he longed to do. But what of her, pray? "It is not Wulf's fault, it is mine, she told herself vainly as she lumbered along past the Sayre Gardens with what haste she could make on her huge bundled feet. No doubt I should not have heeded him, never even started for Canterbury. But she had started, and had got him here, as she had promised. And they were well cared for, well treated, the Christ Church schoolboys, as Edgar had promised. She doubted that Wulfric would notice if they were not. It would take starvation and daily beatings to break through his joyful preoccupation with the reading and learning, pen practice, words, and writing that now filled his life. This urgent thing he had to tell her will have something to do certainly with ink and quills. In the small hovel near the monastery's grain barn, where the mops and the scouring reeds and such like stores were kept, she rid herself of her broom faggot and bowl of sand, nodding to the stoop-shouldered young woman, clumsy on straw feet like her own, who earned bread for herself and her crippled infant by having charge of the place. Then she went on, hugging her freed hands under her arms, to the gatehouse. Brother Godwin, the porter, was busy with a trio of nuns who had just arrived from somewhere with their grooms and their weary little donkeys seeking shelter. When he had sent them off to a guest hall and stables, he beckoned Juliana and fetched out the soiled laundry from the infirmer that had been left for her. A small bundle, she was glad to see. None of the heavy tick covers that would not dry in cold, damp weather. Drape them as she would around Colruna's little fire pit. Most of her washing this season was for the old or the ill in the infirmary. The rest of the brothers seldom changed clothes in the winter, as indeed, who did? Old Colruna had to be coaxed to do so even in the August heat. She was a cold, she would whine, pulling as far away from Juliana as her braided straw truckle bed would allow. Oh, it was a risky thing to take off one's bedgown, and Jilly was a cruel and unchristian to make a poor woman to do so. Jilly meant to steal it herself, she did. Wishing old Colruna at the bottom of a well, she did frequently. Juliana swathed herself more snugly in the blue headrail, settled the bundle on her head, and walked past the gatehouse, again tucking her hands under her arms. To emerge from the walled enclosure of the Christ Church precincts was to step into the bustling market centre of Canterbury. Crossing Burr Street into Mercery Lane, Juliana threaded her way past the stalls of mercers and saddlers, Lorimers and smiths. Shops like cupboards were set into every house wall, with the carts of fishermen, salters, ironmongers slanting every which way among them. The frosty air rang with haggling voices and smelled of horses and eels and humanity. Dodging nimbly to keep the bundle balanced on her head without taking her hands from her armpits, she passed St. Andrew's church door and the row of old Roman baths, honeycombed now with shops. Then at last she was free of horse and foot traffic, and beyond the end of Hawk's Lane could climb the stile to the little meadow where the woolmonger kept his sheep. God knew the beasts had precious little to eat now, but they huddled, heads down, draggled and stained in their December wool, nibbling what they could. Beyond them, in the curve of the old amphitheater, traced now only by the tangle of ivy that grew from its crumbling walls, was old Colruna's hut. Juliana lowered the bundle from her head, ducked under the low thatch, and started down the 3 earthen steps to the dugout floor. On the second step she halted, still bent almost double, blinking into the dim interior. Something was different. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she made out a hunched figure on the stool beside Colruna's bed, where she herself always sat to feed the old woman her gruel. Sitting there now was a young woman cradling a baby within the folds of the headrail that swathed them both. All 3 faces, the stranger's, the baby's, and Colruna's, were turned toward Juliana, pale still moons, oddly wary against the smoke-blackened wall. "There you are, then!" Old Colruna's querulous voice sounded wary too, then turned defensive. "It's Alfwyn, Jilly, my own daughter's daughter. Journeyed all the way afoot from Fordwick, she did, and with the baby to carry." Fordwick, an hour's walk on an easy road. Juliana came down the last step, bracing herself inwardly for whatever was to come. "There's Normans took over the master's manor. They turned her out from her place, they did. She'll have to stay here now, Jilly, and look after the baby, and me too." Her thin fingers twisted the coverlet. "I've sent to tell Brother Seward you're to find some place else to live." After a moment, Juliana put her bundle down. Then she picked it up again, looked at it half seeing, and from it to the upturned buckets in the corner to the fire pit. "Will I not do this washing, then?" she heard herself saying numbly. "Not here, child. You must ask the monks, not me. Ask your kinsman, Brother Edgar. Go along now, do." The woman, Alfwyn, said nothing. The babe in her arms blinked into space. Juliana turned and climbed back up the steps. There was nothing further to say. Brother Seward's rich Kentish kin had given the hut to old Colruna, who had been his childhood nurse. Whatever befell their manor, the hut was hers. She could do with it as she chose. It had all happened so suddenly that Juliana was halfway across the meadow before her mind moved beyond the immediate problem of the unwashed clothes she still carried, to the larger one of where she would sleep tonight, and how live without her laundering, without a fire to heat water, a bucket to fetch it, and the regular daily meal the laundering earned. Then panic seized her. Go along now, do. Go where? Back to Christchurch Priory first, to hand back her bundle. After that, either join the hungry queue at the almoner's window, or thrust herself again into Edgar's unwilling hands. "I cannot do that," she told herself. "I will set out for Winchester. Winter or not, Uncle Robert or not, I will search for Swain, though he will not want me." Certainly Edgar would not want her either. He was already cumbered with homeless kin, as were many of the brothers. The Canterbury family of his mother's sister, summarily turned out of their fine house that Odo might present it to his knight Vital, were also hanging on his hands. "I am a burden," thought Juliana, suddenly humiliated beyond bearing. "A burden to everyone, even to myself. I must leave Canterbury today." Pushing back across Burr Street, blind save to her own thoughts, she did not even glance towards Sunawin's well or remember her promise to Wulfric until she heard his hail and looked around to see him running toward her. "Jilly, at the well! I thought we said, where's your bucket?" He halted at her side, his bright blue gaze moving swiftly from her bundle to her face. What has happened? You have not been home, then? As God lives, I could go home to Pevensey, she burst out. Pevensey is no home now, Wulfric reminded her. He pulled her out of the way of a donkey cart. Come back inside the walls, where the wind does not bite so. Tell me. The tale was soon told. Wulfric was silent, oddly unlike Wulfric, as he walked beside her to the gatehouse, where she gave up her bundle at the porter's window, bitterly aware that it would now pass at once into some other freezing pair of hands, along with the meal it promised. Then he led her on into the great courtyard to a bench set against the high wall. Edgar will say it is God's will, he said, in a voice as bleak as her thoughts. Edgar? Why? It's what I had to tell you. He spoke to me yesterday when he came from chapter. Wulfric flung himself onto the bench, rubbed at an ink stain on his finger. The sub-prior and 3 other brothers, with servants and baggage carts and all. They're traveling to Winchester. They're to bring back some abbot or another to wait the archbishop. You may go with them. I? In such company? Among the servants, you would be safe traveling so. Edgar will arrange it, if you want to. Juliana swallowed, moistened her dry, chapped lips. I will go. God knows I cannot blame him if it is what he wants. Wulfric shifted unhappily on the bench. It is not what I want, Jilly. He flicked a doubtful sideways glance at her. No doubt you will be glad to leave. I know you are often hungry and cold. I cannot stay longer, that is plain, he said sulkily. God's will it may be, but I thought you would not want to go to Uncle Robert. Well, then, I do not. Why do I fight so? Juliana wondered. In Winchester, she would have food, warmth, lodging, servants. But they would be Robert Fitzrobert's food, fire, house, and servants. She could feel her jaw set. No matter, I have no choice. She met Wulfric's eyes. They were cornflower blue above his wide reddened cheeks, alert and searching. Jilly, are you saying you would stay if you could? As well say I would be Pope if I could. There is no place for me here. Or anywhere, she thought desperately. Not anywhere at all. Go then. I thought you would. But hark, Jilly, I have been thinking, since Edgar spoke to me. He half turned on the bench, peering at her intently. Why could you not come back? In the springtime, when the roads are open, bring our mother and Ragni with you, and Lustwin, and Nurse Editha. Then we could all live here together, as we used to. Well, so not quite as we used to, but without Uncle Robert. Have you run mad, Wolf? Our mother would never leave her comforts for a life like ours here. It would not be like ours. She's not penniless. She took a great sack of something with her. Depend on it. Her treasures were inside. That great gold armlet father gave her for a morning gift. Her jeweled brooches. That girdle with the fine silver buckle. No doubt a few pounds of silver pennies. How else would she have got the 4 of them from Lewes to Winchester? And what is left might buy a house here. She would not even listen to such a plan. Well, you could make her listen. Nurse Editha would help you. She had never any love for Uncle Robert. Tell her I wish it too. Tell her Swain wishes it too. Well, no, best not to mention Swain. But no doubt Lustwin. You are dreaming, Wolf. She spoke the more harshly because he had set her dreaming too, asking herself if such a plan were possible, if one could gather the pieces of the old life, begin to put them together in a different way. It would be hard, precarious, but better Saxon hardship than hateful Norman ease. Well, I'll think about it on my way to Winchester, she added bitterly. When is this company leaving? Soon, within a fortnight, maybe 2. A fortnight! I have not even a bed for tonight. Wulfric's face was still mirroring the hopeful images he had conjured up. There must be a lodging somewhere. I will ask the almoner. I do not want alms. I'm a thane's daughter. Tasks, then. God's mercy, Jilly, put down your battle axe. I'll help. I will ask the sacristor, too, the guest master. For the sacristor she had scrubbed the crypt stair in exchange for a loaf almost too small to remember. This talk is witless, she thought. I must find some prouder way to live. I will not cling another fortnight, too, on Edgar's charity. She stood up, silenced Wulfric's eager, wishful planning with a cold finger on his lips. Go now, back to your pens and ink, before Brother Oddbald comes from chapter and finds your desk empty. I'll ask the almoner myself. She turned away quickly toward the gatehouse, heading for the almoner's window in the outside wall. Before she could cross the court, a horseman clattered in through the gate, shouting something to the porter as he went by, and Wulfric was again at her elbow. It's the prior's quarter, Jilly. What? That horseman. He was one of the lay brothers sent to watch for the king's company. Quick! This one was sent down the Sandwich Road, so they'll come into town through Burgate. We can see them all. The Atheling, Earl Morcar, William, too. Wulfric was tugging her out of the main gate and back down the crooked lane to Burr Street. I'd like a look at King William once, wouldn't you, truly, if only to spit at him? It struck Juliana that she might already have had her look that black-omened morning, as she stood on the shore at Pevensey, watching the striped ships sail in through the fog. One of those dark heads might have been his. Slower, Wolf! She gasped as she stumbled and all but fell over her clumsy straw-bound feet. Running at least started the blood coursing, bringing an almost forgotten warmth surging up in fingers and cheeks. Everyone was running, or starting to run, or at least staring at the runners and then walking, hobbling, or peering in the same direction, along Burr Street toward the town walls. Soon Wulfric was forced into an erratic, dodging pace by the numbers of people emerging into Burr Street from the lanes ahead. By the time they passed under the windows of the tiny church of St. Michael's, which bridged the street at Burgate, Juliana was breathless. Do you mean to run clean to Sandwich, or just halfway? She demanded, as they emerged outside the walls, and Wulfric kept straight on, down Church Street, St. Paul, alongside the long enclosure of St. Augustine's Abbey. Only to yonder tree. He pointed ahead to an oak growing close to the high, thick Abbey wall. We can climb onto the wall and see everything. Come along, it's easy. It was simpler to follow him than to argue, and possible, though scarcely easy, to mount the thick bare branches of the tree to the top of the wall, which was rough stone but wide as a footpath. Juliana sank down thankfully, hugged her knees, and tried to recover her breath. Her legs ached. She had not the strength these hungry days to run so without tiring. Below in the street, people still hurried past, though many had begun to turn aside into the marketplace opposite, empty save on market days, where there was room to congregate and line the road. A few discovered their tree and joined them on the wall.